To create speed in butterfly, swimmers have to create a lot of propulsion. To create a lot of propulsion, they have to set up the stroke. In contrast to freestyle and backstroke, without rotation, it's more difficult for butterflyers to do so, but that doesn't mean they're not trying to accomplish the same goal. Hi everyone, Andrew here, helping you help your swimmers get faster. To set up the stroke effectively in butterfly, swimmers have to position their arm so as much of it is facing backwards as possible so that they can move water backwards to move themselves forward. There are two aspects of butterfly that make setting up the stroke particularly difficult. First, there's a lack of rotation in the stroke, which makes it more difficult to position the arm so as much of it is facing backwards as possible for as long a range of motion as possible. It takes more mobility in the shoulders. Swimmers have to be very precise in terms of what they're doing in order to set up the stroke as effectively as possible. Second, there's a major time constraint in butterfly. It's not really possible to glide in butterfly, so swimmers have to move right into setting up the stroke right away, and they have very little room for error because they don't have time to correct any mistakes that they may make. So not only are they challenged because they don't have access to rotation, which allows for more range of motion, they have to make it all happen in a lot less time with a lot less room for error. So if we watch this swimmer here, what we're going to see is right upon entry, she's already getting into that position. The elbows are starting to bend, the hands are starting to drop, and the elbows are staying in the same position. And so she's able to get more of her arm facing backwards, and she's able to begin that process. She doesn't have time to be patient for it. She has to get going right away. And in some ways, it's almost happening as she enters the water. So she's getting into those positions. She's moving towards those positions right away. One thing to notice relative to freestyle is that swimmers aren't going to be able to get the forearms facing back nearly as much. And that's largely due to the lack of rotation, which makes it a lot more difficult to put the shoulder in the correct position. So this is an Olympic champion swimmer, former world record holder, and so she's no slouch in terms of creating propulsion and creating a lot of speed. And we'll see that that's about as vertical as her forearms get. That's about how much the forearms face backwards. And so because of the limitations of the shoulder of the upper body, it's more difficult to create a position that's purely moving water backwards. The other aspect of it, though, is that in butterfly, the upper body is going to lift to breathe, and there's going to be some lift even when swimmers don't breathe. And so even though the arms aren't going to be facing completely backwards, swimmers actually use that to their advantage to both pull back to move themselves forward, but there's also going to be some downward pressure, which is going to make it easier for them to lift up, both to breathe and then also to effectively recover the arms. And so in some ways, that negative of not being able to position the arms to optimally move water backwards is actually leveraged to execute the rest of the stroke effectively. So again, there's an almost immediate repositioning of the arms because it does take time, and swimmers don't have time in butterfly. They have to keep the rhythm of the stroke moving. And as much as possible, everything's going to be facing backwards, but there's a limit to the degree to which swimmers can do that. One, because of the limits of the shoulder, but two, there does need to be some downward pressure on the water in order to facilitate the recovery of the arms and the achievement of the breath. And the basic position, the basic principles, the basic concepts are going to be very similar to what happens in freestyle. The arms enter relatively straight, the hand starts to drop down, the elbow pops out to the side, and now we've got ourselves in a pretty good hook position, which swimmers can use to move water backwards, and they can move water backwards using the strongest muscles of the upper body. So the movement itself is not particularly complicated. It's really simple. It's just not necessarily simple for swimmers to execute, particularly when they don't have access to rotation and when they're under the time pressure of setting up the stroke in butterfly. So we'll check out these same skills from a slightly different angle with a different swimmer. And so again, entering pretty straight, and then upon entry, the hands are starting to drop down, the elbows pop out, and now we have this hook position. Similar to the last swimmer, it's not oriented completely backward. One, it's very difficult to do that due to the anatomy of the shoulder. And two, right there, you can see that provides some of the lift to get up, get the shoulders clear of the water, one, to breathe, and two, to recover those arms effectively. So again, popping the elbows out, driving the hands down, and the whole purpose of that is to create the hook to get everything facing backwards as much as they can, and that's going to be what's required to apply pressure into the water. And so from here to there-ish, not much pressure backwards. You can see the elbows are sliding out, but they're not sliding back. And then right there, really starting to apply pressure in the water, and you can see the corresponding surge up and forwards as swimmers start to apply pressure. So the beginning of the stroke is more of a repositioning. There's not a lot of pressure being applied, and then right there, boom, now we apply pressure, but we apply pressure once the arm is in position to be moving the body in the right direction. And so if swimmers were to apply pressure in this position, they're going to send the body up. They're not going to send the body forwards. That's not going to create speed. And so they have to wait till everything gets positioned more effectively, and then boom, apply pressure, send the body forward, send the body up. So the repositioning is simple: popping the elbow, driving the hands down, just creating a hook, and then swimmers can apply pressure once everything's in position, and that's going to create speed. So a little bit different take on it here, still entering straight out in front. There's that repositioning, and then boom, that's where we get the application of pressure. And so from here to there, not much movement back of the elbow. It's popping out to the side. The hands are driving down, and then boom, that's where the application of pressure comes, and that's where you see the surge both forwards and up. So this swimmer is going to go a little bit wider here than the others. She's sliding out a little bit more. It's still that same basic position, and there will be individual differences based upon limb length, based upon range of motion, based upon strength, and other factors that we can't necessarily predict or even account for. So swimmers will be different, but the idea is, can they access the same basic position where the elbow is out to the side, it's up higher than the hand is deep, the forearm is facing relatively backwards, and then from that position, swimmers are applying pressure to surge themselves forward and up in the butterfly's case so that they can move down the pool, they can recover the arms, they can breathe. So simple. The elbows are always going to pop out. Sometimes the hands move more, sometimes they move less. But again, getting into that same basic hook position and then applying pressure to create speed. So we'll see the same dynamics here. So again, pretty straight on entry. The elbows are going to pop out to the side. The hands are going to drop down. There's not going to be a backward movement of the upper arm. And then right there, now we're going to apply pressure. You see the surge up. You see the surge forwards. So again, same principles, slightly different execution. This swimmer has their hands pitched out to the side a little bit more. They're a little bit wider, but they're going to perform the same basic motion. They're going to reorient the forearm from a straight position facing straight down, and then it's going to be facing relatively backwards from this point on, and then they're going to apply pressure, and that's going to send them down the pool. So that is all it is. It's a repositioning of the forearm and the hand from facing down towards the bottom of the pool to relatively backwards, and then from there, swimmers can apply pressure to create speed. And so that is the key concept here. It's how can swimmers transition from their entry to their pull as seamlessly as possible. They've got to pop the elbows out to the side, drive the hands down, rotate everything around, and once they do, they're going to be able to apply pressure there in a way that's going to move them forwards and then up, which is what they need to do to swim effectively. So it's all about setting things up quickly, setting things up well, and that's going to help swimmers create as much speed as possible. If you want to learn more about how to help butterflies create a lot of propulsion when they pull, check out the video below.